when there is stress in the family, when there's more anxiety, when something happens that kind of pulls the family apart, resources, time, and so on and so forth, children tend to turn to each other. And we think that this is how they are turning against each other. That's actually somewhat their support system. I'm not saying it's okay that they're fighting with one another,
Right.
but this is their way of actually getting or taking out some of that anxiety.
This is NICU Babies Parent Support with Kathryn Whitaker, a podcast from Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit that provides free personalized support, resources, and community before, during, and after a NICU stay. My conversations here focus on education and personal stories with medical and hospital professionals, counselors, therapists, and NICU moms and dads from across the country. So whether you're preparing for a NICU stay, you're currently there, or you're months and years past your stay, you belong here. The NICU is hard. We're here to help. I'm your host, Kathryn Whitaker, the mom of 6 children, including my very own NICU baby, and I'm so grateful that you're here. Well, howdy, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. We've had some really great guests this particular season. It's all about focusing on hope. I know that for many of us, we've gone through something really hard and really traumatic. And sometimes it's hard to remember, like, where's the hope in all this? And so all of my guests this particular season either have an expertise in that, or they themselves have gone through something hard, and then they're reminding you of what it looks like on the other side. My guests today, we're transitioning a little bit. I know we spend a lot of time talking about your NICU baby, but today we're talking about your NICU baby's siblings. And so whether you have one or more children at home when your child is in the hospital, I know that oftentimes that sibling dynamic gets tricky and hard and can in its own way feel overwhelming and difficult. And like, I'm already dealing with this thing in the hospital, and now I have to focus on all my other kids at home, and they're arguing and it's hard, and someone please come fix it. And so I found the person that, while she won't fix all the problems, she certainly shares some excellent advice. And y'all, I'm the mom of 6. I've heard some excellent parenting advice in my time as a mom, but I was so struck by the relatability that Dr. Siggie shares in this particular interview. So I know that if you find yourself at a junction and your baby either is in the hospital right now, or you're home and the sibling dynamics are crushing you, let this be the interview that gives you some hope. But so my interview today is just one I think that's going to give you a little bit of boost of confidence. My guest today is Dr. Siggie Cohen. She's known as the child whisperer for her unparalleled depth of insight in working with children, and you will absolutely hear that in our interview. For more than 35 years, she's worked extensively with thousands of children and families, first as a teacher and then as a child developmental specialist. Dr. Siggie has a private practice. She lectures and teaches throughout the LA area. Her approach has proven successful in helping parents and teachers deepen their understanding of children's behaviors so that they can support them through the entire range of emotional challenges, including behavioral difficulties, transitions, and trauma. And she's also the mother of 3. So with that, let's chat. Well, I'm super excited to have the expert in the room. Dr. Siggie, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here and excited.
Well, I know that you have this big social media following about your experience in child development, but you first started as a teacher. So tell me a little bit about why you chose the career of education, and then sort of how you transitioned over to child development.
Sure. So I did a lot of things in the field of children, anywhere from camp counselor to just loving the kids, the babies in my neighborhood, to, being a preschool teacher. I was a nanny, I think, many years ago, if I'm So somehow it was my go-to. I can tell you, I didn't actually plan on being a teacher or even a therapist, never in a million years, even though in my family, everybody always, Siggie's going to be a teacher. Siggie's going to be a teacher. And I'm like, no. So it was just something I was naturally good at and also enjoyed. It was almost like easy. So I didn't think that's a job. It shouldn't be easy. And little by little, I realized that is what I actually not just can do, but want to do, and I love to do. And as a preschool teacher, I wanted to enhance my education and kind of aim for something more than that. And so I went back to school and got my master's. And really, my main aim was to teach college, actually, and to stay somehow with the little ones. So I started by sheer coincidence. This is a long answer. I'm sorry, I'm almost
No, this
done.
is great. This is great.
Yeah, by sheer coincidence, I took over a parenting group that a colleague of mine had. And I was like, I don't know what to say. And she's like, you'll be fine. I'm like, okay, I'll do 3 sessions. It lasted a whole year. And then more parenting groups. So I was doing both. And then I realized this is what I want to do. This is what I love doing. I'm already doing it. And I went back to school and got another degree and opened my practice. And here's where we are.
So, how did you go from in-person practice to saying like, "Hey, maybe I should share this on the internet. Maybe it'll resonate with people there too." Like, was it a conscious decision or you were like, "Oh, we'll just go and see what happens." What were you thinking?
So I'm not really sure, to tell you the truth, when was the exact moment that I uploaded a short clip on Facebook years ago. And I just did. I don't even know what brought that on. I just thought, I think that I always felt, or throughout my work, I did feel that what I am doing one-on-one or even in a small group actually is good for many more people. And I think that was in the back of my mind. How can I reach more people? So I uploaded these clips. I started putting them on Facebook, and they were awful, but people loved them. That's when I kind of realized that talking to more people all at once is really what I should be doing and wanting to do. And this is how I can reach more and help more, because a lot of the times the issues repeat themselves. And I saw how it resonated. So in the back of my other mind, I always wanted to write a parenting course, which I did throughout my work here and there. And that kind of pulled it all together, sort of like social media, even though I was just on Facebook, bigger scale, writing an actual course, and then pandemic. And we're all home and we're all on social media and we all have so much time. And it kind of really solidified it all. And here is where we are.
And here
Obviously,
you
a
are.
few more details in the, on the journey, but I teamed up with my niece, actually, and me and her are doing this whole thing together. So,
Well, the joy is apparent. I mean, I think that we tend to listen to people that are joyful when they do something that it is that they love. You're drawn into that. But I think, Dr. Siggie, there's a lot of things that you share that I think parents want to talk about, but there's like this season of parenthood when our kids are little that we feel like it's safe to share publicly. And then as our kids get older and we start to transition the story over to them, we go through even harder things, but it's really difficult to talk about that. So it's so affirming and good to have people like you that can still talk about those because parents still need to hear that. But it's a safer space because you come from a different background than we do. And so when you share that, people are like, yes, I feel seen. And I'm so glad someone said that. And also, I'm not alone. So I'm so grateful that your voice is out there. Just as a mom of
thank
older
you.
kids, thank you. So I think
Yes,
it's
thank
great.
you.
So on your website, you share this, and I loved it. It says, you can be the parent that you want to be. So, in your experience, what kind of parents do we want to be? What are we all, I think, searching for, at least in the people that you've worked with, both virtually and in person? What kind of parents do we want to be?
I think parents want to be confident, calm, and do it all as perfectly as possible, which is one of the things that I say, yeah, that's probably not going to happen, but we can work on being more confident, calm, sort of like understanding children allows you, how knowledge is powerful. And when you feel a little bit more, I don't know, at ease, but a little more experienced, a little more confident.
Yeah.
That's where I come from. So I think that parents want to be calm and confident, have the knowledge, understand more, not feel so, in that jungle. What? Why? What's going on? Why? All that. And at the end of the day, they do just want a peaceful home, a more, I would say, even keel dynamic where it's not so chaotic in the family and the home life. So I think this is what they all want. They obviously still also want their children to be happy, which we work with that. You probably saw. So I work on happy is not necessarily the only goal, is one goal, but the journey is has multitude layers. So we want children to be aware and regulated. And I think parents understand that more and more.
I'm glad that you said perfection's not the goal. I was hoping that you were going to touch on that because we don't want to mess up. I think we're all afraid that if we do this one thing or say this one thing, it's all destroyed and we've completely knocked down the foundation that we built. So I'm grateful that you remind us that perfection's not the goal. I love that you said confident. That's good. I think there's some
Yeah,
days that I feel really confident, Dr. Siggie. Other days I'm like, whose kids are these? Who decided to do this? What's happening here?
exactly. Yeah. And I love what you just said. You're absolutely right. The fact that as so much of the time it feels like this one thing we do or did is ruining it all. So the anxiety about every little aspect of it and not seeing it as perfect allows us to maybe accept more, regulate, right? Kind of like, I'm not saying be dismissive, oh, it doesn't matter, not
Sure.
like that, but not overdo in terms of constantly wanting everything to just be right. I think the mess of life is just part of life.
Speaking of messy lives, I know that the majority of people that listen to this podcast are either freshly out of the neonatal intensive care unit or they might be, a few years out or even a few months out. And many of them find themselves, Dr. Siggie, with this baby in the NICU, but they also have kids at home. And so for some, they maybe know, hey, we're going to have a NICU stay with this baby. And they're starting to think like, how do I prepare my kids, one, to sort of enter into that trauma, but also if I have more than one child. So like when we were in the NICU, I had 4 babies under the age of 8 and I had this NICU baby and I'm like, what are the dynamics going to look like? So can you give parents some advice? Like if you know that you're going to be in the NICU, how can you help your kids sort of prepare them for that? And then maybe the fallout of when that baby comes home and what that might look like.
Yes, so no doubt this is so stressing, so scary, right? Not
Yeah.
only you have a brand new baby, you have a NICU baby, and that just tops the anxiety, right? The fear, the panic. So I think the number one thing is to, and you probably know that, and I think a lot of NICU sort of like staff knows that, the support system, first and foremost. So the support is for the infant, the support is for you, the support
Yeah.
is for the children that are at home. This is when we can rely on the village. And I think that it is a good thing, whether it's hired help or whether it's the extended family. Trust that they are there to help. And right now is not the time to judge or criticize how they do things, because the children that are home just need that kind of support and need to know that they are cared for no matter what. So I would say support system is such a foundation. So whatever you can do to gain that, to have that, trust and rely on it for yourself and everyone else. And then no doubt, children are curious, but they lack the experience and the understanding. And they're also very general. So what ends up happening is that sometimes they question where you are and what is happening to you more than anything, but they're really worried about themselves. So one, I think that fact information not necessarily overloading them and not saying, I'm sorry, I can't be with you, that apologetic intonation that makes them think like they're supposed to be pitied. There's no pity here. There's just care. And yes, we are managing, even if we're sort of like having to split it. Talk about life is a bit messy and it's not perfect. Wow. What a lesson, right? For everyone. So, yes, I am not here. I know. I bet you miss me. I miss you. Notice my intonation. I'm not overly, once again, pitying, feeling sorry for my child, because that tends to make me feel sorry for myself, actually.
Oh.
So I want to say the facts. Then, however old the children are, there is very specific NICU terminology. You probably know all these many
All the
different
acronyms,
words. Yes. Children love that. And you can, however old they are, obviously, give them, teach them what it is that you're learning, not again as an excuse, sort of like, well, but just as information,
right.
sort of expanding their mind, enlightening them, showing them that you are also learning about all of that. You can do some play, right? They can NICU at home with a teddy bear. You can add some more gadgets to how the NICU is, because play is very comforting for children, and this allows them to really process the information, not just in an abstract way, but in a concrete way. I think that the number one maybe, and this works for almost all situations where we are definitely anxious, like I said, the over apologizing and trying to make sure that everything's perfect. It's actually not the case. It's more like, yeah, wow, we're going through a tough time. This is really hard for me. It's hard for daddy, for grandma, right? I mean, include everyone. Talk about the emotions. Say words such as it's confusing. We're not really sure. Yeah, what is happening? And what do we rely on? Once again, who's helping us? Who's taking care of us? In the NICU, the doctor, the nurses, we rely on each other. At home, older children, you can talk to whoever you want, tell your teacher. So that story can be kind of like out in the open. They're not walking around thinking like, what's going on? And I don't know. And they can see how it resonates with other people. Wow. And maybe they even talk to a best friend, right? Like 5-year-olds can already say, I have a little baby in the NICU. And of course, the other 5-year-old is like, I don't know what you're talking about. But that alone allows them to kind of just normalize what is happening in their life.
That could have been the podcast right there. No, that was so good. I loved at the beginning how you reminded people that now's not the time to judge how other people are taking care of your kids, like as long as they're cared for and loved. Like we have this desire, I think, or at least I did in the NICU, to control as many things as possible. And sometimes it's the relinquishing of control that's really hard and saying, like, what
Yes.
can I do in this moment? So I'm glad that you mentioned that. I probably needed to hear that. I know it's been a few years since we've been out of the NICU. But so I want to shift a little bit to siblings because we certainly experience that in our household. And I'm guessing that some people listening may be in the same boat, is that there's definitely this relationship between them and the new baby and them and you, but there's also the relationship that they have with each other. And we noticed that there was a lot of friction. I'll say that in a nice way. There was a lot of friction between each other. And so how do you address that? How do you mitigate that in a time when it feels chaotic and stressful? Or even, Dr. Siggie, maybe 5 years out when the kids are a little bit older and maybe your other NICU baby has medical needs and there's still that friction. How do you address it in a good, healthy way and also make them feel seen?
Right. So we talk a lot about sibling-hood and sibling friction that does exist no matter what, right? Let's talk
Yes.
about just normal. We don't have a NICU baby. The kids are still fighting with each other. Now you add that. You want to notice that when there is stress in the family, when there's more anxiety, when something happens that kind of pulls the family apart, resources, time, and so on and so forth, children tend to turn to each other And we think that this is how they are turning against each other. That's actually somewhat their support system. I'm not saying it's okay that they're fighting with one another,
Right.
but this is their way of actually getting or taking out some of that anxiety that they don't know what to do with it, how to express it verbally, who to go to. They're safe with one another. So if you notice your children are fighting more, stop for a moment and go, is there more stress if there is a baby in the NICU? For sure. But you know that happens during other transitions, right? Whether we're moving, whether something else is going on, and so on. Always kind of pause and go, I think you guys are fighting more. So siblings take out their friction with life themselves, their own stress and anxiety on one another. So if you are only there to put out the fire, stop, that's not okay, enough. Stop yourself for a moment and go, am I doing this constantly? So what is else? What is happening? And here's the time to kind of see the iceberg. What you're seeing is the tip. And now you're like, oh, there's more. This is not just constant bickering, fighting with one another on the surface. Something is feeding that. And that's, let's go back to, let's talk about what we are going through as a family. What questions do you have? What complaints do you have? Because them picking on each other is them complaining, actually, obviously, not verbally, not directly. So can you complain? Can you whine? Yes, children need to complain and to whine. And most of the time, you don't actually need to fix much of it. Think about therapy. A lot of times, yes, the therapist gives advice and there's back and forth, but how many times you just need to talk to someone who will only listen? That's kind of what you want. Your children need to sort of get that out of their system, and they don't know, and it's almost physical for them, which is why they're punching and hitting and verbalizing their stress in sort of like rude, mean ways. Yeah. So notice there's more to what is going on. Pause. Talk a lot about the emotions that we're all going through. And you don't have to, okay, so how about you can come up with some suggestions, ideas, but your goal is not to fix it, because we're in the journey and there's no fixing it. We just have to keep going. But if I am nourished, if I am nurtured while I'm on this journey that is very difficult, I am definitely stronger, more resilient. I can cope better. That's really what it is. Think about it.
That's so good. This is why you're the child development specialist. This podcast is produced by Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit, but we're more than simply a podcast. Be sure to download our app in the Apple Store or on Google Play, or you can visit our website to discover all the ways that we can support you as a NICU parent at handtohold.org. You can join one of our support groups, sign up for counseling, find loss and bereavement support, request a peer mentor, or check out our educational resources and family stories. And all of that is at no cost to you. I'm curious, you mentioned therapy there at the end. How do you know, Dr. Siggie, if it's just normal reactions to the circumstances, or, hey, I think we need to have a third party and we need to get them into therapy to maybe address something bigger than what you can address in your own home? How do you know what you can handle, and how do you know what needs someone else?
I think if you're doing something and it's not actually working, maybe that's when you want to turn to, someone else for advice and support. I also think that the chronicity and the intensity, how much of it, right? If you're noticing that it's constant, that your children are not taking a break from it, like, they have their own stuff, they get along, they rely on one another in many positive ways, but then they also have that more normal. But if it feels more chronic all the time, if it feels more intense, then, just a little bit of what you were used to or what you thought is normal. yeah, maybe that's the time to turn to someone and just kind of like check in, with your kids, and someone that can actually talk to them sort of indirectly, get things out of them because they are understanding there are things underneath the surface the children actually can't express directly.
Yeah.
So, you would ask an adult, so tell me what's going on. You would ask a child, and they're like, nothing. Because they're sitting right there in front of you, and literally in the here and now, nothing's happening.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't know, nothing. Yeah. So, you want someone that knows how to talk to children in a way that they get them, and they get them to open up and express themselves in all sorts of ways: play therapy, art therapy, movement therapy. I mean, there's a lot of that. And of course, any person that, has worked with children enough knows how to kind of talk to them. And sometimes I think it's good if the siblings come together.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, there will be times that I'll say, you guys want to complain? Go ahead. What do you want to complain about? Let's start. Mom, dad, and they're like, we can complain. Yeah, you can complain here about your mom and your dad, how much you. So this just kind of gives them allowance or permission to be themselves.
Permission's important. When you were speaking, it reminded me. So when our baby was in the NICU, our oldest was 8 and he was playing flag football. And I remember at the time I felt guilty, like we shouldn't be adding this other activity. But looking back, now I have the benefit of looking back 15 years and saying that probably was a good dose of normalcy for him. That at the time I felt like it was a bad thing. I felt people were judging us, like, you have this baby in the NICU. What are you doing at the flag football field? But looking back now, I think that probably helped him. It was when you talk about getting together with your buddies and saying, oh, my brother's in the NICU, and they have no idea what it was. But at least they knew that his brother was sick. But they're like, but also, let's play flag football. Let's get
Yeah.
this game going. So as much as we needed normal stuff going on in our life, I think our kids do too. So maybe some encouragement to a parent that if you have things like that happening, don't feel guilty for your kids being involved, because I think it certainly helped with his other siblings at home. Like that friction was sometimes better after a flag football game because he'd been able to get out some of the anxiety and do something that he loved. And then he came back to the house, and he was really the oldest one. So he was the one that kind of knew a little bit more than everybody else. But anyway, I thought those were
Yeah.
some good pieces of advice.
Yeah, totally such good advice, because you mentioned guilt, and the guilt, my child in school, my child, sending them all over the place. So they're doing whatever it is that they were doing before. Think that this is their path. This is their life.
Yes.
You're not sending your child to school because you cannot take care of them. Your child goes to school because that's the right thing for them. Even preschool, this
Right.
is their life, or any type of extracurricular. This is
So good.
about them. It's not because it's convenient for you. It's because you're thinking of each individual child. And, my child goes to school not because I need to do other stuff. Oh, no, because this is their life. This is about them and for them. So, yeah, it can help a little bit with that guilt.
I love that perspective so much. You mentioned you have a lot of things that you share on social media, but there was one that stuck out to me. And you said parents should ask fewer questions. I know we've been sitting here talking about you should let your kids complain and ask them questions, but it was such a good little snippet, a reel that you talked about that parents should ask fewer questions. So why don't you tell us what you mean about asking fewer questions so that people understand the dichotomy between letting them complain and asking for input, but then also stepping back and asking fewer questions?
Right. So I think we tend to ask a lot of yes, no questions
Mhm.
all day long. So I want you really to count how many yes, no questions you're asking, because there are
You're
way
not
too
asking me to
many.
do this right now? I'm not
Yeah,
supposed to
no.
keep score? Okay, good. Okay. Okay,
No,
keep
no,
going.
no. I'm
Okay,
just
good.
saying, like, you
Yes.
parent out there, just
Yes.
literally sit with yourself. I said that to a parent one time, and they said, are you kidding? A day? An hour I couldn't get through. She said there was so many. So
Yes.
the yes, no questions are way too many. Children shouldn't be deciding constantly, every split second, on every little thing. It's overwhelming. It's way too much. Also, remember, your child relies on want. I want or don't want. I want and don't want is not fully thought through. They didn't sit there and included all the whatever information and kind of came with that decision. It's like instant, constantly on edge, which is why you hear, I want, I don't want. No, I don't want. No, I said, but you said you want. No, but okay. So yes, no questions. Also, close-ended. Like what I mean by that, think if your question can lead to a conversation or your child responds and then there's nowhere to go with it. Mm-hmm. How did you like, did you have fun? Yes. No, right? Again, it's sort of like I'm not asking maybe if you want or don't want, but I'm sort of trying to get some information, and the end result is really something that just ends the conversation. So, no, I didn't like it. What about it? Can you be specific? Children are very general. They also feel a lot of times bombarded by us. We think our questions are showing them respect. We're interested, right? We want to be close to them. Our questions a lot of times are, if I use a child's word, annoying. And they're like, yeah, because, think that in your relationship, it's so much more complex than just constantly asking someone questions and getting just information from them. That's actually very flat relationship. So I'm not saying don't ask questions, but think, is this actually an invitation to a bigger dialogue? Can you rephrase however it is? Because you can think very quickly, I'm going to ask this, and this is most likely what I'm going to get. You know your child. So can I not ask that? Can I think of a different way of asking it? Can I break it down to specifics? Can I really be in sort of like in my intonation, curious, as opposed to just looking for information, right? Curiosity is very different. Curiosity is me truly seeing you and hearing you, as opposed to just give me what I want to hear, which children also do very often. So
I know I'm thinking of my teenagers, but you're right. Like when someone is curious about you, what is it? I mean, it makes you want to share more with them.
yes,
Because you're like, they're
exactly.
listening to me. They're so curious about me and you feel loved and seen. Now you're making me rethink all the questions that I've been asking my kids this is good though. It's not a bad thing. But
Yes.
how curious have I been about what's going on in their life? Or am I trying to like in my mom mind like check off the list? Like I asked them how school was. We talked about that test, like going through the litany of all the things that you would normally ask your kids. And then also how that makes them feel seen with one another. Well, mom asked you that, but she never asked me that. So how do you develop that relationship with your kids based on your curiosity? That's a great way to look at asking your kids questions. Oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
I'm glad I asked you that. So you have a ton of amazing resources on your website, and I know you have some specific to parenthood and specific to siblings. So let's talk about some of the free resources that you have that parents can access and kind of what they can expect from those.
Right. So there is a whole section free on separation anxiety. And I think with specifics about school for different ages, like more school separation anxiety, right? Like for the little ones, it started more with the little ones because obviously they lack the experience and they have more of it because they really don't know what's going on. But there's also some advice for separation anxiety for a little bit the older kids, the kindergartners, first grade or second, and so on, when they really feel that. Even middle schoolers can feel that anxiety in a whole different way. And then there is the parenting kit or toolbox that is also free. And it's about staying calm, your own self-regulation. So a lot of tips and tactics on how to do that, because, if I just tell you, come on, you just need to relax, that's not working, right?
When someone tells you to relax, it just makes you more stressed out.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yes. So tips and tools on that. There's also about boundaries. So a whole section on that in that parenting toolbox, and on coping and resilience for your children, how to enhance that by not overdoing, overfixing, overknowing, right? We got it all and we come fully loaded. And that means that our child is passive, doesn't know anything. And that's not true. Children are naturally smart, naturally savvy, naturally have resilience, coping skills, problem-solving skills. We just need to tap into it and allow them to experience it. Wow. If we do it all, I'm all over the place. And parents today tend to be that way because they are savvy and knowledgeable themselves. But you just have to kind of give your child some more room to work through some of the challenges that are right there in front of them without you constantly doing it all for them, which actually goes back to resulting in more anxiety for them, more anxiety for you, right? If I don't know what I'm doing, then I'm much more anxious. And so that's not necessarily good. So all that is right there for parents to tap into, to download. And
we'll make sure that we'll link to all that in the show notes. You also have a new course called the Everything Siblings course, which sounds absolutely fascinating. And I wish I would have known about that years ago, but I think it's fairly new. So why don't you give people an idea of what they can expect in that course as well?
Yes, we launched it a few months ago, and it started with just, let's just kind of talk about how kids fight. And it went into
then it escalated.
Because we realized there's so much more. So it is from anywhere from bringing the new baby home to all types of sibling, not just friction, relationships.
I love that.
Throughout the ages, all the many types of conflicts. What really are they fighting about? Explaining and giving parents idea of how to understand their children's connection so much better, so they can actually walk them through their relationship better, rather than, again, stop and separate and punish and, treat it in such a negative way that only adds to the problem that is really already there.
Well, I'm glad to hear it doesn't just focus on the friction part, but I love the relationship. Like, because our children will have much more time together with one another than they will have with us. And so this relationship building that we instill from an early age can be such a benefit to them for the rest of their life. I normally end with advice, but because the season is all about hope, I'm going to rephrase the question. So if there's a parent out there, Dr. Siggie, that feels overwhelmed or like they're doing it wrong, what hope would you give them to encourage them?
Find something every day that you can truly feel good about. I think that when we are constantly seeking for the external validation, how am I doing this right? What am I seeing that is working? We can sometimes get lost in in this jungle of how overwhelming it is. Mm-hmm. I also think, and I'll come back to that in a minute, but I also think that often, and I think this is true for all of us, including me, social media is a wonderful place, but please know and understand your own limits. Understand the limits of social media as well, and realize that no matter how much you know that things are not as perfect, if it's affecting you like everybody else is doing it right and I'm not, stop and take a look around and find your own support system right there. I always, I've heard this a million times. This is even before social media. I go with my kids to the restaurant and, oh my God, it's awful. And all the other kids are sitting there. I'm like, which kids are they? Because all the other parents are coming to me with the exact same. I'm like,
Right.
you saw a moment in time where something did work. But yeah, kids in a restaurant, are you kidding? I mean,
Right.
it's hard. Or traveling with them anywhere, whether it's 20
Yes.
minutes standing at the supermarket. I mean, that's normal life. This is tough. Morning routine, bedtime routine. No, things are not working just because I have a perfect lunchbox. So remind yourself of that and find the things inside you, small, however they are, that you can trust that you are doing something right, because that's how you build yourself. If you feel good, you are a little more confident and calm about anything and everything, right? So hope, I think, is something that we want to hold on to. It's not about being optimistic. Oh, everything's going to be great. It's about, I know things are not always great. I am working at it. There are little things that are working. See the specifics from like kids, never, always, you never let me, you always. Yeah, no, it's not never and it's not always. And notice that we speak to ourselves like that too, many times, right? Nothing ever works. Nobody. Whoa, maybe these are two big words that are not really realistic. So find ways to break down the reality that comes at you all at once and see it for the specifics. Every little thing that you hold on inside you helps you build calm and confidence. And then it changes how everything is, right? Because our mind does set the tone to so much of what is happening.
That's such excellent advice, Dr. Siggie. Thank you for all of it. I'm so glad that we get to go back and listen to that anytime. Thanks for being here. Well, that was super fun to have an expert in the room. She was so, so good in today's 2-minute take. I kind of didn't know where to start as I was reviewing what all we talked about. There were a couple things that stuck out that I think are worth mentioning again, and maybe just reminding you again that you don't have to be the perfect parent. That's not the goal. I know she said that at the beginning, but I think it's worth saying it again. When we focused a little bit on the sibling part, this was the thing that got me. She said we often focus on the friction instead of the relationship. I mean, I know I do that as a mom. I look around and I'm like, why are my kids arguing about that thing again? We just had this argument, either 30 minutes ago or 17 times yesterday, and we're still arguing about the same thing. And it's easy to focus on the friction. And she was reminding us to focus on the relationship. What is it that's causing the friction? So look past the friction and how can we help them build a relationship? I thought that was really, really good stuff. I was thinking back to when our son was in the NICU. Our kids were 8 and under, so 8, 5, 4, and 2. Yes, I got the math right. But the 8 and the 5-year-old, they had this train table in their room, and it was mostly a great activity. They would play together, and it was great. But there were times when we would either come home from the hospital or we would have them playing and they were just losing their minds. And I'm like, I thought this was a place that y'all got along and now you're not. And it was easy for me to focus on Thomas, the tank engine, and take my frustration out on him. But a reminder to look at the relationship, like how am I helping my boys and my other kids get along and what's the long-term effects of that? I thought that was so good. And then this idea when we were visiting about what other activities do our kids do? And when she said, they have their own life, right? You're focused on maybe the relationship with your partner or your spouse, and also the condition medically of your NICU baby. But we often forget that our kids have this life that they need to live in this, whether it's flag football or dance or this reading club that they're doing or playing with the neighbors, like shedding the guilt of that and remembering that this is their life and you're doing things that are good and beautiful for their life too. So I think that maybe might help you shed some of that guilt that you might be carrying of, Am I doing enough? Am I loving enough? Am I being enough? So a lot of hope in today's interview, but we have more coming. So don't go anywhere, because next time on the podcast, you're going to hear a little bit about this.
I want people to see Kai and not be sad.
Mm.
And I think that was part of my vision for our family, was we can have this beautiful life, even though there's these challenges.